And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Not such a great day for the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who is facing some very tough questioning from lawmakers today over the Justice Department's handling of files related to Jeffrey Epstein. What a shock. Files that have exposed sensitive private information about survivors despite redaction efforts. And those redaction efforts are also very much in question. Bondi is confronting a new wave of criticism stemming from the political saga that has dogged her term after the release of millions of additional Epstein disclosures that survivors have slammed as sloppy and incomplete. She is testifying now before the House Judiciary Committee, getting very tough questioning, particularly from Jamie Raskin, who's the ranking Democrat on that committee. It was the first time that President Donald Trump's Attorney General was testifying before Congress since a tumultuous hearing last year in 2025 in October, where she repeatedly deflected questions and countered Democrats' criticisms of her actions with her own political attacks. And speaking of attacks, there is an even worse kind of attack in Canada, not on Canada by the United States. This is, however, extremely bad news for our neighbors to the north. 9 people were killed in a mass shooting yesterday, the country's deadliest school shooting in decades. The tragedy occurred in Tumbler Ridge, which is a remote mountain town in British Columbia. At least 7 victims were killed at a high school, while 2 others were found dead in a residence believed to be connected to the incident. Dozens more were injured, many suffering serious or life-threatening injuries. The suspected shooter, described in an emergency alert as a brown-haired woman wearing a dress, was found dead at the school with a self-inflicted wound. Authorities said they are working to determine a motive. We will bring you the latest as that emerges. Meanwhile, yes, back on the Hill, the members of Congress are shifting their attention back to Jeffrey Epstein and his files after gaining access to unredacted documents this week, generating a new round of scrutiny for several major figures. When you say that the members of Congress are turning their attention back to Jeffrey Epstein, for some members of Congress, in fact, many members of the Congress, that attention, that focus on Jeffrey Epstein has never really gone away or vanished or diluted or disappeared. The Department of Justice started granting lawmakers access to the unredacted files on Monday after facing pressure over what it has kept concealed for nearly 2 months after the official deadline that was part of a congressional vote. And the Congress voted for the deadline to distribute those documents. This is kept concealed for nearly 2 months after that deadline for documents to be mostly made public. But the access is only added to the frustration and the eagerness of advocates and survivors calling for the full disclosure of the DOJ's records. Democrats, along with Representative Thomas Massie, the Republican from Kentucky, who has been as aggressive as anyone on this issue. He is the most vocal Republican advocate for the files release, accused the Department of Justice, after reviewing the documents, of violating the law that was passed by both houses of Congress, signed into law by President Trump, and accusing the documents of violating the law by improperly covering up names that should be publicized. along with revealing names that should remain private. House Speaker Mike Johnson, the Republican of Louisiana, defended the administration's handling of the files release yesterday, but he said he also planned to review the unredacted documents. And then there is this from CNN. They are reporting that President Trump is expected to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today, where the two leaders are set to discuss potential military options regarding Iran. The situation in Iran, very fluid, very big problems, obviously, still with public discontent and demonstrations and the shakiness of the regime, but no certainty about the direction that either we or the Iranian government and its difficulties are going. The two leaders are supposed to be discussing military options regarding Iran. A source, unidentified, says that Netanyahu plans to present Trump with a fresh intelligence report on Iran's military capabilities amid heightened tensions in the Middle East. The upcoming meeting follows a series of high-level exchanges in recent weeks. And after Trump threatened to strike Iran if it refuses to sign a new nuclear deal. Iranian officials, meanwhile, have repeatedly said that while Tehran does not want war, it is ready for it. Then we also have the continuing argument between the U.S. and Canada about the bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge that they are trying to build, the Canadians, and President Trump is trying to block. Coming up on the Michael Medved show, CNN is reporting that hiring picked up as 2026 kicked into gear, with the U.S. economy adding a stronger than expected, 130,000 jobs last month amid the unemployment rate dropping to 4.3%. That according to new Bureau of Labor Statistics data released today. Economists were expecting that employers added about 75,000 jobs in January and that unemployment held steady at 4.4%. That according to FactSet estimate, a series of estimates actually. Wednesday's report, today's report delayed a few days because the brief government shutdown. Remember that? It was almost unnoticed by most people. That was delayed by the government shutdown. This new report today also provided more clarity on recent labor market trends. Job growth last year was far weaker than previously estimated. We'll be talking about what all of this means and how this relates to one of the most controversial statements President Trump has ever made. He has predicted new economic growth of 15% a year, which a lot of people are deriding. It's very, very far from where we are right now, but that's where President Trump seems to be. We'll be speaking coming up to Rick Newman, founder of the Pinpoint Press, former senior columnist for Yahoo Finance, chief business correspondent and Pentagon correspondent for U.S. News and World Report, and multi-award winner, author of 4 books. He'll be joining us coming up on the Medved Show concerning what is going on with the economy, with growth, with President Trump's bold prediction, and much more. Rick Newman on the way, right here on the Medved Show.
Sign up today for our free weekly newsletter at michaelmedved.com.
And on the Michael Medved Show, we talked just a moment about the economic news, which has generally been pretty good economic news so far today about the jobs growth, particularly in January. What does it all mean? Are we going to be reaching the astonishing golden growth that President Trump predicted yesterday and has been holding on to his prediction, growth of 15%. Nobody better to put that into perspective than Rick Newman, who is the founder of Pinpoint Press, a former senior columnist for Yahoo Finance, and chief business correspondent and Pentagon correspondent for U.S. News and World Report. And remember, to get the benefit of interviews like this one, subscribe to our YouTube channel, our flourishing YouTube channel, Michael Medved Official. Rick, your piece on today's jobs report is that we have a K-shaped economy and jobs too. All the growth is in healthcare, social services, and leisure hospitality. How are business services doing? Rick Newman.
Not so great. I mean, we've had a net loss of jobs in business services. And in fact, out of 11 large sectors, things everybody's heard of, manufacturing, information, retail, things like that. Over the last 12 months, we've lost jobs in 6 out of those 11 sectors. And we had a good jobs report for January. The number was 130,000 new jobs. That's a good number, no doubt about it. But almost all of it, as you mentioned, was in healthcare and in social services, and there was a little bit of new hiring in construction, and that's about it. So when you see job gains that are just really narrowly focused on just a couple of industries, that tells you that we don't have a great labor market. And if you look at what's happening in consumer confidence surveys and what Americans say when they're asked about the economy, they've got 2 big concerns. One is elevated prices. That's nothing new. And American workers are now very concerned about the labor market and job security, and that is new. And if you get deeper into the data does support that. We have a lot less job growth, and it's much more narrowly focused now than it was before President Trump came into office.
Okay, in terms of the job growth that is such a big concern, does a lot of the restrictions in job growth have to do with tariff policy?
I mean, it's hard to tell, but there are some signs. If you want to figure out why hiring has slowed down, you have to go through earnings calls and see what CEOs are saying. I mean, everybody likes these simple narratives about the economy, but they're not always simple narratives. But here's one big clue. The sector that's known as trade, utilities, and transportation has had a huge loss of, I think it's 190,000 jobs during the last 12 months. And guess why that might be? I mean, this is obviously very susceptible to Trump's tariffs. It's trade, transportation, and utilities. So stuff coming into ports and things related to that. And it makes total sense that hiring would be down there because Trump's tariffs, he has put new taxes on literally a couple $1 trillion worth of imports from almost every trading partner. That just makes stuff more expensive. When you make stuff more expensive, people buy less of it. So costs have risen for businesses in the United States and for consumers in the United States. And there's just a little bit of less economic activity around that. So that totally tracks with what you would expect to see from Trump's tariffs.
Well, the tariffs also do mean that in terms of inflation, which bothers many Americans, it also has an impact on the rate of inflation, doesn't it?
Sure. And inflation is elevated. Of course, inflation has been elevated since about 2022 when it peaked at 9%. And it came back down. Inflation is now about 2.7%. So that's not terrible. It's not 9% inflation. But the problem, as you know, any normal consumer will tell you, is that all the prices that went up stayed up. And we are not seeing anything really coming down in price. So we still have higher than average inflation of 2.7% on top of all the other inflation we had during the last few years. So there were some predictions last year, let's say 10 months ago, that Trump's tariffs, which looked pretty severe at the time, were really going to send inflation spiraling higher. And that did not exactly happen. And, we're trying to figure out all of this in real time. But A couple of things. There are a couple of reasons why inflation didn't go higher from the Trump tariffs. Number one is Trump backed off on some of the tariffs after he saw the stock market tank. So the tariffs weren't they're not now as severe as they were at the beginning. Another one is that companies have figured out how to evade the tariffs. Another one is that Trump offers exemptions from the tariffs. And then the fourth explanation is that there's still inflation coming from these tariffs. So importing companies here in the United States have been very good at figuring out how to minimize the effect of those price increases, but they're still here, and some economists think they are still coming. So Americans are very concerned about affordability, and Trump has started talking about affordability. But one thing Trump has not done is make stuff more affordable by getting rid of those tariffs.
And speaking of making stuff more affordable, Trump says that's not important because the economy is going to grow at 15%. That's what he said to Larry Kudlow yesterday, I believe it was. It is being largely ridiculed. How often has the economy grown at 15% rate, as President Trump predicts?
I think it has happened twice. Now, I didn't go all the way back to 1789, even though Trump did say something like, well, in our early days, when I'm not even sure there's economic data from 1789 or 1790, but we did have a GDP growth close to 15%, I think 1 or 2 years during World War II. And the reason was it was just a completely exceptional time because of the war. That was all related to production of war material. Otherwise, I don't think you want 15% economic growth. I mean, that if you grow that much, something is wrong. And just to put this in context, he was talking about what the new Federal Reserve Chair, Kevin Warsh, assuming he does get confirmed by the Senate. He said, yeah, if Kevin Warsh does his job, I think he could get GDP growth to 15% or higher. So he just set an impossible bar for Kevin Warsh to clear. And what I want to see in prediction markets is how many days after Kevin Warsh takes the job will President Trump start to criticize him, much as the way he's been criticizing the current chair, Jerome Powell.
Well, that will be obviously an interesting drama as it unfolds. What a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for the perspective. And we will play some of those statements by President Trump about that 15% growth, statements that are being very largely ridiculed.
Medved.